This is a talk that and we have given previously at Gamescom last year. Abdurrahman and Zainab were there, and it was actually given by me and my colleague Nabez. Nabez is not here today, but I'll be taking over for his part as well. And basically, we had the chance to uh, talk about this very important topic, which I know that you're also through this program trying to work on at Gamescom, which is the world's largest game event. And I think it's very important because this is a conversation that we should not stop talking about, especially for us coming from ancient Mesopotamia with one of the richest heritage, civilizations in the world, and very little representation and a lot of misrepresentation. And you'll talk about all of these things throughout the presentation. But yes, again, we are Kever Entertainment, an independent game studio, and we come from Kurdistan, right? We come from the Kurdistan region of Iraq, which has a lot of beautiful nature. For all of you who have been there, it is a land of mountains. It has a lot of really beautiful geography, a lot of different wildlife, and yes, we are very much proud of our mountains. They are our cultural identity. But at the same time, Kurdistan is also home to like the rest of Mesopotamia is home to thousands of years of civilization. There have been many different cultures, many different um, entities that pass through these lands, right? So for it's one of the longest inhabited, human settlements, human pockets of living in the world. Like for example, the citadel of Erbil is considered to be the longest inhabited place on Earth, like as a settlement. So all of this, results in having a very rich, uh, both written and oral traditions, and at the same time, it's also a thriving piece of geography. There's a lot that's happening, a lot of new investments, things are moving very fast, a lot of developments. So we are very much aware of what's happening in the world. This is not like, let's say, 2 decades ago where things were a bit more separated. Things are quite connected globally. But growing up, I believe like most of you guys, and my generation especially, because I believe I'm a bit older than probably most of you guys. Um, we grew up, mm, with the question of, um, if we have all this, heritage, culture, beautiful nature, and then why are we not seeing ourselves in entertainment products? Because like all of you, I also grew up with video games, with films, with cartoons, and you never see, Middle Eastern characters. You never see our like civilizations represented. You never see a lot of our culture represented, except for in some, like odd cases that can be considered misrepresentation. But we will get to that. And yes, because for me personally, uh, seeing culture or heritage uh, in games has been a great inspiration. It has introduced me to very interesting things. For example, I remember as a kid playing God of War 2 from Santa Monica. I got really into Greek mythology, and I think beforehand I didn't know much about it. But it got me curious. I started learning about the myths. I started learning about the philosophies, and I learned about the monomyth, like how the hero's journey works, because all of this is derived from the Greek mythology, and it's still something that is applied today to films like Star Wars, Matrix, Harry Potter, you name it. There is the hero's journey in there. And another one that has been very influential to me personally was also Assassin's Creed. Somebody is drawing on the presentation. Was that me?
I'll remove that in a second, sorry.
All right, okay. It's cool. It's a cool line. But yeah, for example, like specifically Assassin's Creed 2, because it was set in the like Renaissance era in Florence, Italy, uh, and it beautifully represented all these landmarks, the 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 live, the lifestyle, everything that was happening during that time. And it got me really curious. It got me into learning about the Renaissance, the art movements that went through that time, all the important landmarks, like for example, in this scene, you're seeing the Duomo or the this ancient cathedral in Florence. And this is a simple example of how games were able to influence me personally to get into other cultures, to learn about them. And this is quite a large industry. And this is just basically to highlight how influential or how effective it can be, because the game industry as of today is larger than film, music, and TV industries combined. It is really huge. There is a very growing market for games. Many people play games. I believe more than 3.2 billion people globally play games either on console, PC, or mobile. So you can imagine what big of a reach that is. And at the same time, there is a very big global market for indie studios, the smaller studios coming from all around the world. And we will get to why that matters as well, because um, when we are talking about the bigger companies, like the bigger studios, the ones that are spending hundreds of millions of dollars on each project, usually they try to stick to stories, cultures, and themes that are already tested. They don't want to take risks, like big risks. And it makes sense because they're spending a lot of money. They want to make sure that this money comes back to them. There's a lot of expectation on the line. Many people are waiting for their games, so that they cannot take like brave risks in terms of like representing a new culture or telling a new story. But that is not the case with indie studios. Like a studio like ours, or a lot of you guys are also making games, and some of you might be willing to open studios in the future. For us, it's a much smaller risk because we're not investing millions of dollars. Actually, it can be a strong point for us. It can be something that can help us stand out in a saturated market. What makes us very unique is our own heritage, our own culture. It's something that nobody else has. So that is definitely one thing that we can utilize to stand out in the market. Uh, I'll take a few case studies, like just some real life examples of how video games have contributed to preserving cultural heritage. And I will start with, again, Assassin's Creed, which is this specifically is Assassin's Creed Unity from 2014. And for just a bit of context, in 2019, this cathedral, which is Notre Dame of Paris, it caught fire. It was burned down. A lot of it was damaged. The structure, the treasures inside, many of the ancient, elements of the church were destroyed, sadly. And this was a big shock for uh, the heritage of the world, because this is a very important landmark. It's a very old cathedral that is in the heart of Europe, and it's considered to be like the pinnacle of Gothic architecture. And something really amazing happened because, a few years earlier, Assassin's Creed had rebuilt that church for the game, for Unity, and they had taken meticulous care on making sure that the cathedral is accurate to the finest detail. They took all the measurements. They made sure the architecture is correct, all the angles, everything. And because of this care, the French government was able to use the model of the cathedral from the game in efforts of reconstructing the real cathedral, and it was presented to them by Ubisoft, right? So this is an example of how a video game, for their attention to detail and respecting real life heritage, was able to contribute directly to preserving a damaged historical site. And I think this is something very much admirable. I remember, like back then, this this conversation started uh, on the news. Everybody talking about how a video game was able to contribute, and that was from the tangible side of things, like something concrete. But at the same time, there are other games like The Witcher that are fantasy, right? So this doesn't take place in the real life. But what The Witcher did that no other game had done before was to introduce the world to a very rich folklore and mythology of Poland, right? How many of us knew about Polish folklore before seeing The Witcher? And this is very important for us specifically because we also come from a place that has a very rich heritage, but it has not been introduced. And it just shows us how a single successful game that is really well made can change that drastically. So The Witcher introduces folk tales, basically culture, really cool stuff from the Polish mythology, and this was basically it got millions of people interested in this specific culture, and then it promoted tourism, and at the same time, something that is even more important in my opinion, it started an industry in Poland. So CD Projekt Red is the same studio that's making like Cyberpunk right now. It is opened the way for tens and probably hundreds of other studios, of investments, of an entire industry to be built in Poland. The reason we are showing this like specific example is because we are in a very similar place. Like, we have people who are doing games or making games. There are a lot of talent we have, a lot of people with really cool ideas, and we also don't have an industry. So this is a time for us to look at how the world or other places in the world have gone through the same basically experience and taken advantage of their own heritage, not only to preserve it but also promote it, because this is uh, it's pretty cool. It really gets people hooked onto the specific culture. Should we move on, or do we have any? Is anything unclear that we should maybe talk about right now?
I
Move
mean,
on.
you can move on if there is any question. I'm gonna collect them.
Sure, that's good. Okay, from here we'll move to another case study, uh, which is a bit different this time. So this is Ghost of Tsushima, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. What makes this a different example is that Ghost of Tsushima does not come from Japan. It's a game about Japan. It takes place during medieval Japan, but it comes from a non-Japanese studio. And this is very important because this is a subject that we will talk about later on, which is representation in games. Um, this game was critically, but also commercially very successful. It was well received in Japan. Uh, Many Japanese outlets, many critics praised it for being a very accurate and faithful representation of medieval Japan. And this is very important because when you, as a developer or as an artist, are trying to represent another culture in your own creations, you owe it to these people to make sure that what you're doing is faithful. It is represented faithfully, it's correct. And that is why Sucker Punch brought in experts from like historians, museums. They were constantly in talks with Japanese experts to make sure that everything they represent is accurate. And this is what leads it to be acceptable by the other cultures, because there are also examples that are not accepted. Um, this also goes beyond just games. Like for those of you who've played the game, if you finish the game, then there is a mood that you can unlock, which is the Kurosawa mood, and it basically allows you to play the game in this black and white style of Akira Kurosawa, the Japanese director. It kind of shifts the game to look like his films, and this just shows you how much love and care this studio had for Japanese culture and cinema and games. And this is what basically makes it feel like a love letter. It's an homage, it's a tribute. And this is very important because there's a very fine line between paying tribute to a culture and appropriating it, or basically stealing it or using it in a immoral way. And we will talk about that in a bit. But another example, another concrete example about this game is on the right side, this other like in-game shot. This shrine exists in the game. It's like a temple. It's called the Watatsumi Temple inside the game. And because the game takes place on the Japanese Tsushima island. And a few years ago, a typhoon hit this temple. it destroyed it partially. And this was very tragic because this is like a small temple that is not many people know about, right? So they started a GoFundMe campaign to collect the money to rebuild the temple. And the man or the monk responsible for this campaign, who was working at the temple, later spoke to the media, and he said, "I did not expect that our GoFundMe campaign will be successful, but they were able to raise $260,000 to rebuild the temple in a very short time." And then he realized later that most of them were the fans of Ghost of Tsushima. So this is also pretty cool because uh, this game introduced this temple, which is just a small part of the game, to such a large audiences. And when you start to know about heritage, you also feel connected to it, when it's done faithfully. And so when it got damaged, a lot of people felt like they had the responsibility to contribute to rebuilding it. And I think this is also another beautiful story of how a video game contributed to uh, preserving like tangible heritage. Now we'll just briefly talk about what we do, like at Kever, the type of contribution that we do to this important aspect of our industry. One of the projects that we have done recently has been a like a VR experience that puts you inside the interior of an old traditional Kurdish house, which is a type of or a style of house that no longer exists. Almost is kind of dying out because people's lifestyles have changed. But back in the day, they had a specific way of living, and the newer generation don't really have access to this. So maybe my parents, had access to this, or they had seen this firsthand, but I haven't. People younger than me have not. So it's important that we can try and change that. So this was our attempt at doing that. So basically, we made this based on references. We did a lot of research on the type of materials used, the type of like furniture, the type of fabrics, the patterns, and to recreate this VR experience. So when the player steps into this house, they are basically transformed in time back into this really cool environment. They can interact with objects. They can learn about what each of them did, like what functions they had. So this is another way of basically highlighting the power of games and interactive medium to preserve heritage, because this can be used for educational purposes. You can use this at schools, at museums. You can make variations of the same idea. It doesn't have to be a Kurdish household. It can be the marshes of Basra. It can be anything that is kind of dying out. And by creating these virtuals, um, copies of them, not only do we preserve them, we also make them accessible, because this can be available online for people to play from all around the world who may not be able to visit, let's say, this specific location. And that is, something that I think is is a big strength when it comes to video games and other interactive media. This is the trailer of the game. So we showcased this product at High-Tech's Erbil 2 years ago, and the reaction was amazing. We really, really enjoyed everybody testing it out. They were all very like it really shows you the impact something like this can have. It was tested by hundreds, if not thousands of people, and yeah, it was really amazing because we had kids like really like little kids testing it. We had older people testing it. We had all sorts of people from different backgrounds. We also showcased this in Baghdad, I believe, at one of the BGL anniversaries. So some of you might have seen it firsthand. But yeah, this is just an example of how we can use our technology to our advantage. Um, Another project that is very close to my heart personally, this is my own book, Mythical Beings of Mesopotamia, which is an illustrated book that takes uh, a number of mythological beings from our folklores and ancient mythologies. So these includes, creatures from Kurdish folklore, from Arabic folklore, from Assyrian, like Chaldean, Aramaic folklores, and introduces them in a book. Why a book? Because to make a game like The Witcher, you need millions of dollars and hundreds of people. And as indie entities, we don't always have access to a lot of resources, but we can still contribute. And this is where, a lot of times you can be creative. So uh, that is, for example, one of the main reasons why it's Gaver Entertainment and not Gaver Games, because we want to explore other mediums of entertainment to still be able to make this impact that we believe is our social responsibility. And at the same time, because uh, the book is illustrated and is done in a style that is very reminiscent of what you would see in games, it is still very much relatable for the younger audiences, people who were not, for example, familiar with these stories, because a lot of these stories come from oral traditions. They die out. Like, for example, the creature on the right side, the giant creature, that is a cannibal like creature that lives in the mountains and eats children. And my grandmother used to tell me stories of her when I was a kid. I don't know why, because it traumatized me, but I guess it also opened my imagination. So that was the positive outcome of that. Um, but doing this in this like video game style, allows us to realize that we also have, cool creatures. We also have things that are as cool and many times much cooler than things that we see in other like video games and films. But the only reason we are not familiar with it is because they have not been represented visually, right? And for us to perceive something as interesting, we have to see it as being cool as well. Cool factor is a big thing in the game industry and films. Like, how many of you, for example, started learning about the lore of a creature from God of War or Dark Souls after seeing it in the game, right? So this is the power. You see something, it's cool, and then it gets you intrigued and interested to go and learn more about it. So this book serves the same thing. It still talks about the stories and everything, right? But it's just an introduction. It's like a gateway into an entire world, because we have thousands of creatures, and I've only introduced like maybe 20 of them in this book, but we have thousands of them, and I'm not gonna be able to present all of them, but whoever reads this book or whoever sees it will be intrigued to learn more, to go on and learn on their own. So again, using different mediums to still preserve heritage. Another example from the same place is this other project that we're working on, which is Pyramid action figure. So Pyramid, for those of you who don't know, he's a Kurdish poet. He's from Slemani, and he's a very interesting character. And yes, a while ago we were approached by a client who, similar to us, look at how we are trying to make an game industry like back home. They were trying to build like a toy industry back home, because we don't have toys, we don't have figures, right? So their idea was to, again, combine heritage or build figures and action figures and toys informed by our characters, our culture. And this was one of the projects. So when we saw that they're working on this, we were very much excited to jump on and help them and bring this project to life. So these are some of the concept art that I did for that project. Trying to different variations, different facial expressions, how we can make it like a playable toy where you can pose it and do cool stuff with it. Another medium that we use, it's a bit more traditional in a sense, because this has to do with art exhibitions. So But to be honest, like at Kever, we don't shy away from any project that is trying to preserve heritage or promote heritage. We always try to support, we always try to be there. So this is one of uh, these examples. So this was an exhibition that was curated in The Hague. The exhibition was trying to basically mix between heritage and art, using different mediums like modern mediums. And in this specific uh, exhibition, we participated with two projects. One of them was illustrations from my book, the ones that you saw beforehand, and the other one was this 3D printed structure. It's a basically it was a sculpt or like a model of some traditional Kurdish housing. For those of you who are familiar, like if you have been to Acre or Hauraman in Kurdistan, these are mountain like cities or towns built on the slope of a mountain. So a lot of times they build their houses one on top of the other. They're very interesting. Like the roof of one house will be the yard of the second. And this is something very unique to our region because of the geography, because of the topography. And we wanted to represent that in a like an artistic installation. So we built these different structures in ZBrush and then printed them and then presented them in this exhibition to spark a conversation about art, about heritage, about architecture, about our culture in general. So yeah, again, just reminding you that we can do more than just games to promote heritage. All right. Now we will get to a different section of the presentation, but this is yeah. Go ahead, Zainab.
Sorry, we have some questions in the chat before moving on to the next.
I think this is a good time to take some questions.
Okay. So about Grandpa's Irie, Sukaina said that's lovely. May I ask what software was used to create the assets? One issue is the lack of references.
Yes, that's a good one because we had the same issue. Sadly, similar to not having a game industry and not having other mediums, our heritage has not been explored enough. So you will not find references easily. You will not find the stuff that you're looking for easily, and this is where it's also important for us um, to find creative ways to fight this because references do exist. And for example, what we do at Kever, we are constantly looking. We don't wait for a project. Like we're not waiting for a project to come to go and research. Um, we are always on the lookout for anything that will inform heritage, right? So old photographs, old books, museums. Like we went to museums to take photos for like Grandpa's Irie. There is some small museums here and there. Sadly, it's not that easy, but you can do it. You can definitely do it. You can visit the sites if they exist. And if none of it, exists, for example, in the case of my book, because it comes from oral traditions, you have creative license. But again, uh, in my case, I really wanted to try and create something that was as faithful as possible. So even when I was making like these fantastical creatures, I was still looking for local uh, elements, props. So, for example, the type of clothing, what kind of fabrics, the type of animal features, what type of animals we have in the region. You cannot just put anything on a creature. If they have horns, right? You cannot use the horns of an African antelope because we don't have them. So you have to look for the local animals. What do we have? We have rams, we have like wild goats, we have, so you have to try and be really mindful about this. And it is important if you're working in heritage, uh, research is a big part of it. I would say it's probably one of the most aspects of it because it is what allows you to create something that is truly unique. But yes, sadly, we don't have a lot of references to. So I would say just be on the lookout, always keep an eye on it.
Okay. We have another question
Sorry, Zainab also asked about the software. We use variety of software. So we use ZBrush for sculpting. We use 3ds Max, Maya, a bunch of other stuff for texturing like Marmoset, Substance, Painter. I myself, I don't develop assets. I design, but probably if Nabaz was here, he would be able to tell you more. But basically, we use a bunch of them, and then we build the final product in Unity engine.
Karar said, where can I find this book about mythical beings of Mesopotamia? I'd like to take inspiration from it for my game.
Yes, yeah, that's a question that many have asked me recently. Sadly, the book is not printed yet. We are focusing on the game right now, but right now it's in the final stages. I'm basically looking for maybe publishers, but it has taken a bit of a slower kind of development cycle because the focus right now is on the game, and we are a small studio. But I'm really hoping to be able to jump back into it and basically finish it and print it. But you will be able to find updates about it on my like personal accounts, but also Kevin Entertainment. So you'll be able to find some stuff there. But it's not printed yet, so it's not in the market.
Okay. I will also share your Instagram page on Discord for anyone to find.
All right.
Another question I think you just answered. Is this book part of the game's planning where the developers later decide to release it in the deluxe edition? I think they're separate projects, so yeah.
They're separate, but I have designed it in a way that is almost like that. So the way I did it is that okay, this can easily become a game. And the reason uh, we made that decision, or I made that decision, is because of the things we mentioned earlier. For example, one of them is to create a sense of a visual style that is close to video games. But at the same time, we have projects for the future that are culturally inspired in a similar setting. So this has been for us also as well, like research, developing characters. So the book specifically is not for a game, but it will definitely benefit us for later projects.
Okay, and then one last question.
Mhm.
Any AI you have used in any way in your game?
Uh, we we have a very strict policy about using AI for creative work. We are big um, believers in art. Um, we're very much an art-driven studio. But when it comes to the development side of things, I believe in the programming side, our programmer has used AI to uh, expedite the process. But for generating visuals, no, we are very strict about that.
Also, one last thing. I
Mhm.
will take the liberty of sharing the master class that you did with us before because you shared good insight on how to collect references. So I will share that in the chat and also on Discord. You can
Sounds
continue.
good. Yes, we can do that as well because we also have a recording of the previous talk. There's also some questions and answers. I'll share with you some resources that you can share with them as well. But yeah, that sounds good. And then somebody asked, "منو صمم هاي الشخصية?" I did the all of the illustrations, all of the concept art for the book. And yes, the creature does eat kids. A lot of our folklore has a lot of terrifying stories. It's that is why, we believe it's a great match for horror, like horror titles, like games. And yeah, it's quite rich in that sense. I don't know why. I have some theories maybe we can talk about later, but it is interesting. Oh, I don't think the game will be banned. No, the game will not be banned. There is quite a lot of interesting stuff out there. It just has to be rated properly. So, uh, in the game industry, there are rating for games. So depending on the level of violence or gore or anything, then you get a designated rating and you're good to go. Any other questions, Zainab, or should we move on?
I think that's it.
All right, I'll do fine. Somebody has asked, how do we find funding for such projects? Yeah, that's also an interesting one. We don't have a lot of dedicated funding for games or entertainment projects, but you might be able to find funding, like small funding for cultural projects or uh, entrepreneurship, like business. So there are definitely some local organizations that would occasionally fund these projects. For example, for my book, um, I got some funding from Goethe Institute of Iraq, which is a German cultural institute that supports cultural projects. So that is, for example, where you would find something similar. Using generative AI is not prohibited generally, but for us at the studio, we don't do that. It's just one of our policies that as Kevin Entertainment, we don't want to generate like AI visuals because we believe in human creation.
I think there's one new question, but I believe it's in
Okay.
Kurdish, so you have to do the work for that.
Okay, I was ready. Yes, safe. I also think it would be horrible when everything becomes like AI generated. It's just it's losing something that we've had for millennia. Yes, there is a Kurdish comment as well. I'll also translate it. Somebody's asking, Kalinka is asking, how can I make good concept art? Should I make concepts or jump directly to creating assets? Uh, it depends. If the concept artist and the asset developer are the same person, then you can use the asset development as your concept, ideation. But it's always easier and faster to draw or like design on paper or like 2D, then transform it to assets. How to get better at concept art? Zainab will share with you another masterclass that we had done that is specifically about concept art, so you'll probably make use of that. All right, we will move on. And this section, as I mentioned, is like the other side of this coin because we talk about all the ways that we can show or promote heritage through games. Now we'll talk about the moral and the responsibility side of things, right? Because um, there are some interesting things that can be highlighted here. When we talk about the game industry, this is not only about games specifically, right? The technology used in games is very powerful, and the similar technology can be used for real life projects. For example, these are some examples of an American company called Cyark, and for for a very long time, for many years, they have been really hard at work at scanning, like photogrammetry scanning of real life archaeological sites all around the world. So not only in the Americas, they're doing it in Latin America, in India, in Mesopotamia, like in Iraq, in Turkey, in many different places. And the purpose of this is to have a digital footprint, a digital example of these existing sites, so that in the case of disaster, we have a reference of them, an accurate reference. And you saw like how like the Notre Dame church or the temple in Japan were destroyed because heritage is prone to damage. And having something like this is like a guarantee that we at least have a digital copy of it, right? And uh, how we can take this further. So these scans that are made by SCI-Arc, they're done for archaeological and archiving uh, purposes. But as game developers, what we can do is we can make them interactable, like the VR game we made. You can take these sites, create things that basically interact with them. You can use them for games, for other things, and this is what gives us as game developers the power to take this one step further. Yes, another opportunity is collaborating with museums, with educational places that are trying to use technology to talk about art or explain like complicated like architecture or basically anything because they like these cultural institutions need our skills. They need our technology to do do what we want to do. And this is basically goes back to our shared goal. They want to preserve heritage. We want to preserve heritage. We have the technology, they have the assets. Then you work together, and then you create a digital protection for these stuff. The picture on the right side with a bunch of people, it's a picture I took myself. So when we were at Gamescom to give the speech a day before, I was passing by a museum, and then a bunch of people they had VR headsets, and they were watching an art exhibition. So the world is already moving in that way, and that was very interesting to me because we are already taking steps. This is happening, and it's definitely hopeful. Yes, faithful representation. Um, yeah, this is where things get a bit tricky because there's a lot of cool cultures around the world, and a lot of times you might feel inspired by it. Uh, but we have to keep in mind that cultures are human heritage, right? They come from people. They don't come from a vacuum. And every culture has things that are very unique. They are basically a manifestation of thousands of years of a certain lifestyle of struggles of identity. And when we are trying to do this, we have to be very careful. And sadly, this is not always done well in the game industry. So you might recognize this character on the left from Call of Duty Modern Warfare, the 2019 remake. And when this game came out, uh, I was very excited as a Kurd, right? Because this main character, Farah, she's clearly Kurdish. She looks Kurdish. She's wearing the Kurdish female fighter clothing, and all of her comrades, they have Kurdish names, and it's clearly inspired by the Kurdish women who fought against ISIS, right? And this was cool because okay, finally somebody is talking about this. It's giving us representation. But when the game came out, I was very disappointed, like many others, because the game doesn't take place in Iraq or Kurdistan or Syria or anywhere else. It takes place in a fictional country, and it has nothing to do with our fight. The reason this is dangerous or hurtful even is they are taking the cool factor, the visual aspects of these women who actually fought and gave their lives to protect their people and homes, but not to their message or their struggle. No credit is given to them at all, and this is where it becomes exploitation. This is where you would think, okay, how much of this is intentional? How much of this is just lack of awareness? But as a Kurd, this felt very much hurtful because uh, my culture is being used, but it's not. I'm not getting any credit, and this is very important because it doesn't happen with all the cultures. It might happen with those that are less represented. They have less voice. So, for example, they would take our culture and use it, but it's because we don't have a voice in this industry. And that is why it's very important we keep talking about this. We keep mentioning these things. We should be calling them out. We should be have this conversation because maybe sometimes it's just lack of awareness. I'm not sure, right? But I would love to sit and talk with like you know these developers. Like if you're gonna take the cool factor, why not tell their message or make up your own characters? Make up a culture. Why take an existing culture? Because it activates trauma. It activates again. Um, I mean, also we in the Middle East have faced centuries of colonialism, and basically it was a period where all these entire cultures were subjugated to a lot of like injustice, and this is kind of bringing similar results, and I hope that the industry is gonna mature in this sense, and things are gonna change, and we will see less and less examples of this. A different example is this character. For any of you Metal Gear fans out there, shout out. Good job. This is Sniper Wolf from Metal Gear Solid, the 1998 game by the legendary Hideo Kojima. This game is action, adventure, kind of sci-fi, espionage, a lot of like cool different stuff. And it's not a very cultural game in a sense. It's a lot more political. But for those of you who might remember from like history or context, in 1992, the Kurdish population of Iraq came under a genocidal campaign by the Ba'athist regime. And at the time, more than 100,000 Kurds were killed, and millions became refugees in Iran and Turkey and Syria. And in 1992, there was not a lot of coverage. Imagine, this is a world without the internet, right? So nobody knows about this except for some journalists or some people on the ground. But at a time like that, Hideo Kojima, in 1998, decided to give us a voice through this character, through Sniper Wolf. Even though she looks nothing Kurdish, she's not dressed like a Kurd, but I still feel like this represents me because it has to do with intention. This was done from a place of tribute, from paying homage and respect to a culture, to a historical tragic incident. And in that case, this is an example of a good representation. And the reason why I'm bringing this example is because I can only talk about this as a Kurd. I cannot speak for anybody else. So that's why these examples have to do with the Kurdish identity. Because again, I do not give myself the right to like talk on behalf of another culture when they can represent themselves. But yes, these are two very similar examples, but with totally different outcomes. One of them is fictional, has nothing to do with culture, but is giving us a voice when we needed it. And the other one is taking our culture without giving any credit. So, it's just there's, different examples of the same case. By the way, just some context. Sniper Wolf is not a playable character in the game. You basically fight against her. Sorry for spoilers. This is a very old game. You should have played it by now. But he gave Sniper Wolf a few lines at the end so that she can basically talk about the Kurdish suffering of the 1992. And this is just a small snippet of that.
I think sound is not shared.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Let me see how.
I think when you press share, there's a share sound, an option.
Okay, there's also advanced option.
You can try stop sharing and then share back again with
All
sound.
right. Okay. Advanced sharing options, and then there's one person.
Yeah, there's a checkbox that says share sound on the right, I think.
Maybe only you have that as an admin because I cannot see that. Let me see. So it says one participant can share at a time and multiple participants can share simultaneously. And then there's advanced sharing options.
I think because you're co-host, so I think you have the.
No, I think
Okay,
you have the layouts, and under the layout you have current only as a background, then you have shared option. And in the shared option you have shared sound.
Okay, I got it. Found it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Abdurrahman. Yes, share sound is here. So you didn't hear the grandpa's eerie music as well. That's sad.
Yeah, no, sorry.
It's okay. The trailer is on YouTube. You can watch it there. But yeah, here we go.
I am a Kurd. always dreamed of a peaceful place like this.
A Kurd. So that's why you're called Wolf.
I was born on the battlefield. Raised on the battlefield. Gunfire, sirens, and screams. They were my lullabies. Hunted like dogs, day after day. Driven from our ragged shelters. That was my life. Each morning I'd wake up and find a few more of my family or friends dead beside me. I'd stare at the morning sun and pray to make it through the day. The governments of the world turned a blind eye to our misery. But then, he appeared. My hero. Saladin. He took me away from all that.
So yeah, in a time when we really needed it, Hideo Kojima gave us a voice, and I think it's worthy of admiration, and it's something that probably I personally would always be grateful for. But this is, the power of games, and keep in mind, games are not just entertainment; they're cultural memory, and we all have the power to decide what gets remembered. Um, the nature photos that you saw in this presentations, they were all photographs taken by my friend Diyar Shahbaz, and I really thank him for sharing them with us to use them in this presentation. But I would like to invite you all to think about a moment in your gaming life, or maybe films or any other entertainment form, when you got introduced to a specific culture. Uh, because I'm sure there's a lot of examples here. Or if you have any other questions as well, but I think that's a nice exercise to have. And yeah, thank you all for listening.
Thank you so much, Haron. If anyone has any questions, you can write in the chat or raise your hand. I'll also
Sorry,
check.
is it Nahori? Sorry, it's a small spoiler, but the game is much larger than that. You can still play it. He's saying I've spoiled Metal Gear for them.
Okay. I think Mohammed Jabbar wants to say something. Or maybe not. Let me just check the chat for any questions.
Okay, I'm also checking. I'm seeing some. So there is one that says it's always better for the people of the culture to make a game about their own culture. Yeah, I would say ideally, right? But that's not always the case. And I think it's okay for other people to make games taking place in different settings, as long as it's done faithfully. I mean, a lot of the films and shows and games that you see are done by Hollywood or other places. But if the developers or the production team are aware about this, then they always bring on experts. They try to make sure that this is faithful.
I
Um,
think,
Yeah, so at least with the right research, yeah.
yeah, I think one of the things we already mentioned to them before, because the whole people here, all the team are working on games, and they have, let's say, 2 to 3 weeks to finish the concept. So when I thinking about the culture, I'm not just thinking about the history things. As you said, the culture is made by human. So even the daily routine, even the things we are doing here, present in other games, like even the normal things. So for example, we have games about tea, how to make chai. We have something else. Like even with that, they can think about because we have a lot of things that differentiate us between the other. So you can get a simple idea to build a game. You can go more deeper, but still, even if you don't have like, there's a lot of references, but you are living today, so you can see anything from daily routine and you can reflect it to their game.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it's still, in my opinion, it still has to do with culture because it comes from a specific place, right? For example, the people in Baghdad have a specific way of living, but that comes from their heritage, right? So it still has to do with doing the right research, like talk to the people. Is that easy to be honest? Just talk to them. Like if you're gonna make a game about Japan, just talk to Japanese people, right? They would know better.
We have a question from Sukaina. She says, do you think focusing on recent history could be more important than ancient history?
Sorry, again. I'll try to read.
Yeah, she said, do you think focusing on recent history could be more important than ancient history?
It really depends on the context, what you're trying to make. Somebody also is complaining about the brightness of the curtains. I'm really sorry. I don't know what to do about this. Let me see if I can. I hope this is better. Yeah, recent or ancient, it depends on what you're trying to say. Um, depends on the narrative. I don't think there is a like either or. It just depends on what you're trying to do. What is more important to you as a person? As what is more important to your message? I think.
Yeah. Marah also said, do you see a collab happening between Cover and other studios in Iraq?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we collaborate all the time with Baghdad Game Lab, and we are also familiar with everybody else. Like we know all the all the cool people that are working in the game development. And we meet almost every year. BGL gathers us somewhere somehow. So yeah, I mean, we're very much open to the idea of working together. We invite people to talk to us about cool projects and potentially working together. We're always stronger that way, bringing more minds, more ideas. Yeah, sure.
She also added to make a game, like specifically collab to make a game.
Possibly. It's probably definitely more complicated because these are things that are done within like one studio because just of each studio has a different structure, has a different, let's say, like legal stuff as well. But it's possible. I think collaborations, even on games, are possible. Yeah.
Karar commented, Mesopotamian mythology and history is not popular with modern Iraqis. Most Mesopotamian mythology I saw in media were in anime like Fate or games like Smite.
Hmm. Yeah, that's true. That's true. When I was a kid, I grew up knowing I loved mythology. I really loved it. I love folklore and mythology. I knew so much about Greek, Egyptian mythology, Roman mythology. I knew so much about it. Like I had books. I was reading. I was fascinated by it. I knew nothing about Mesopotamian mythology. Nothing. I didn't know the gods. I didn't know like the stories. Nothing. Because it was not seen much in entertainment. You don't see films or stuff about it, and that is why this matters more to us than other cultures, is because we basically come from the oldest civilization on the planet, but we are seldom represented. So we have to really try and change that as this generation.
I think we don't have more questions. We have a comment from Nahori that says, I made a game of an idea that looks kind of
Mhm.
silly to make, but I'm still going to do it about my city.
That's good. Yeah. Silly or not doesn't matter. How many silly successful games are there? People love different things. It depends on what you're making. Um, Silly can be cool. AI
Okay.
makes it very repetitive, like it's yeah, there are some other comments here and there, I think. Yes, Psyark is amazing. Somebody's praising Psyark for their work.
There's a question from Nahori also. How can anyone like an indie developer make their game seen by the worldwide people about a culture?
Yeah, so that's the other side of this, because right now we are talking about culture and heritage, but games are also business. So there's a lot to do with marketing. How do you bring your game in front of the right people? And I'm sure there is other sources out there that could do it a lot more justice than I could. But definitely, if you're planning on making a game, like releasing a game, don't do it blindly. Do a lot of research. Join communities like you're doing now. Learn about how games are launched because it's a whole ecosystem. But it's possible. Yeah.
Tahlil said, it's a weird question, but I've been thinking about how memes carry so much inside info and shared history. Do you see them as a new kind of modern day folklore or part of the current culture?
No, it's definitely part of the preservation efforts. Yeah, memes are a huge culture, and they're very strong medium. So yeah, they're definitely doing a lot of that job. And we've certainly learned a lot about other cultures through memes. Not always the best way because memes can also be aggressive and um, negative sometimes. But yeah, it's definitely powerful. It has the power to do it.
Yeah, also, I think some memes make you remember things about your own culture that you forgot.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely part of cultural preservation.
Yeah, I'm starting to see some emerging. There is this guy, and he makes these really nice animations on Instagram. Something comics. What comic? They're
I'm
kind of funny.
Yeah, Abbas Comics, I think.
I think it's
3F
Abbas
Yeah.
comics. Yes, that's the one. And they're very relevant. Like they're very local. I love that about it. Like they're very much uh for us. Like I think other people would not understand it, but for us it's very relevant. So that's yeah, that's what we can do, Somebody's making a comment about how Bobble hanged plants on buildings. Yeah. We have a lot of cool culture that has not been represented.